cover the insurance. Now, let's talk a little bit about builder's risk insurance. So, we require builder's risk during the construction or the remodel of a home. Sometimes that's carried by the builder themselves, or it's carried by the homeowner themselves on it. But we do ask that they have builder's risk. Can you explain what is builder's risk and why do they need it and what does it cover? So let's start out what is builder's risk?
Yeah, perfect. Builder's risk, I mean, in a nutshell, is real simple. It's covering the project while it's in the construction phase. So whether you have fire, vandalism, anything of that nature, the house burns down, tornado comes, that we're going to be able to pay once again for that contractor to construct that.
Okay. What about, does it cover flood?
Flood is a federal policy, so no. Builder's risk policy does not cover flood.
Okay.
You can purchase flood coverage, but that's a separate policy.
What about if there's heavy rains? Would that be considered flood, or would that be considered under this type of a policy damage?
So here we're getting into very specific if a peril is covered or not covered. Yep. And here it depends on how that happens. So if it was overflow, it's flood. So you have to be careful in how the loss occurred.
Okay.
But one thing I wanted to come back to, just as far as a builder's risk policy, it depends on who's purchasing the policy. Because either the homeowner or the owner for a commercial project or the contractor can purchase the policy. You have to have an insurable interest in that location or that building project in order to insure it. So obviously the owner has an insurable interest, so he could or she could purchase it, or the contractor who is hired to do it by the owner, they have a insurable interest because they want to make sure they get paid.
Right.
So either one of them, as you stated, can purchase it, but there are different coverages based on if it's the contractor or if it's the owner.
Okay. What are the differences in those two policies then?
So without getting too long-winded or anything, the couple things that come off the top of my head for a contractor are there's always profit and overhead that a contractor has. So some builders' risk policies do not cover that. If you're the owner and you are generally in the project yourself, you're not necessarily going to need that coverage. Whereas the general contractor wants to make sure that they would have that profit and overhead endorsement on their policy. So it definitely matters if you're the owner or the contractor.
Oh, okay.
If you ever have any questions, certainly I'd always be available and can walk anyone through it and the differences. But just like I stated earlier, you get what you pay for. There's a lot of companies that have some pretty bare bones builder's risk policies, but it's only going to cover you for a finite, just a real small number of perils. Yeah. So wind, lightning, hail, some of those major ones, and that's it.
All right. One of the questions I have is how do you shop for builder's risk? What should you be looking for when you're shopping for builder's risk?
That's kind of a tough question because everyone is so different in that regards. But the bottom line is, for me as an insurance professional, I want to try and make sure that my client is covered for the most perils possible. So the best coverage. We never know what's going to happen out there. So for me, I always would recommend going with a policy that's going to cover them for the most. I have sold policies in the past to people that say, I'm only worried about the major things and that's it. So coming back to, there are a lot of, if you'd say, bells and whistles that we can add to policies. Some companies automatically throw those in because that's all they do is builder's risks policies, and others that's not all they do, so they pull back and they don't offer as many bells and whistles.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you a question. So, say if there's a subcontractor working on the house and he's working on the roof, and he has an employee that slides down the roof, falls down, breaks his leg, what policy covers that? Is that the builder's risk or is that the general liability? And who's at risk at potentially being liable for a lawsuit? Would it be the homeowner that's under contract to have that house built, or is it just the builder? And how do you insure against something like that to come back?
So in theory, the homeowner should be held harmless.
Okay.
In practice, the homeowner might not be. The builder's risk, here again, coming back to builder's risk, and you get what you pay for. Some include general liability, some don't. All you're covering is the structure itself.
Okay.
So here again, depending on the situation, if you're, Steve, the person who's generally in your own house, for example,
Yep.
you would want the general liability for sure. If you have a contractor who has plenty of insurance, or you feel has plenty of insurance, you may view that differently. I might recommend something different, but you may view that differently.
Okay.
But coming back to your question, first and foremost, it would be if the roofer, hopefully the general contractor has done their due diligence and made sure that the roofer has general liability and workers' compensation.
Okay.
So that employee would be covered under that. If that failed, then it would go to the general contractor. And then if that failed, it could come to the homeowner or the owner of the project.
So best practice, really, if you were building a house, you would recommend the person that actually owns the property, because we do a one-time close construction loan. So they actually own that property from day one. Before the shovel hits the ground, they actually own that property, and we're doing draws without that. It'd probably be best practice if the homeowner themselves actually did back themselves up with a policy, probably, and that'd be a builder's risk policy, or would that just be the homeowner's insurance policy right from the front at the beginning?
If it's a new construction, it's not going to be their homeowners, because you can't buy a homeowners on a
To be built.
Right, on a to be built home. So it'd be a builder's risk.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. If it's a renovation project, here again, depending on the situation, it might be best to go builder's risk, or you could keep even the homeowner's policy, but we can't get into specifics here.
Sure.
But certainly depends on the situation there.
Okay.
But I would say, back to your question, best practice, it would always be best if the homeowner would carry the builder's risk with general liability. The general contractor has general liability, who in turn makes sure that the subcontractors also have liability coverage and workers' compensation.
All right. Well, I feel like I've learned quite a bit. Is there anything else, Todd, that you can add to, these insurances when we're doing construction loans, when we're doing renovation or ground up new construction loans?
I would just say that the biggest thing from an insurance standpoint, or from, I guess, the years that I've been in the business that I've learned, is that as a homeowner, you really need to do your due diligence in finding a contractor that's a reputable, that can give you references with good reviews. And then thirdly, though, to make sure that you ask that contractor, the person who's going to build your house or renovate your house, that they provide you with a certificate of insurance. It's very common in the business. We provide certificates of insurance to prove to the homeowner that the general contractor is covered for basically what they say they're covered for.
Okay.
So I would just recommend always make sure that they have their insurance in place by getting a certificate of insurance.
Okay, great. For our viewers out there, how would they get in contact with you, Todd?
Either call our office at 763-205-6666 or on the web at pillarinsuranceadvisors.com.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now.